Okay. So I guess let me just start the show. Looks like we're in, and we can start. So, all right, let's do it. Oh, Ariel's requested. All right, so thank you to our listeners and followers for joining us again for our Twitter space. We're seeing more people join us for this live conversation every time and appreciate it very much. But before we get started, let us introduce ourselves. For anybody unfamiliar with Japan Forward, we started in 2017 with the goal to reach global audiences, sharing stories, opinions, and editorial content from Japan. Our mission, shared by our supporters and followers, is to raise awareness of the Japanese spirit, culture, and tradition. And now let's introduce some of our team who are in Twitter space. Let's try Arielle. See if your phone's working again. Oh no. Sounds like Morse code again. Should we try?
Hello, how about now?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Good.
Hi, my name is Arielle. I am a journalist at Japan Forward. I have been for 4 years, and I cover a variety of topics, going from politics, economics, culture, and so on. But I've been working with Daniel for several editions of Fuji Rock now to cover the music scene in Japan, and excited to be talking about the final day of Fuji Rock today.
Thanks, Arielle. And Daniel, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Daniel. I am currently the chief editor of IGN Japan, which is a sister publication to Japan Forward. But I have been writing about music since 1999, believe it or not. And Fuji Rock, I don't know how many times I've been, but many times. And yeah, it's been really fun coming this time and covering loads of good music for Japan Forward.
Thanks, Daniel and Arielle. And I know Micah, who's been working alongside with you for the last couple of days. I think he's hit his limit, but looking forward to some of his content.
Micah is horizontal right now.
All right. So yeah, the team were in Naeba, Niigata, which is in the northern part of Honshu, in the main island of Japan, on the, let's say, the west part of that northern part. They're in Naeba, Niigata, where Fuji Rock Festival was held over the last 3 days. Fuji Rock Festival is the largest outdoor music festival in Japan. It was called Fuji Rock because it had its origins with the party set up just on the base of Mount Fuji. But I think the organizers learned quickly that during this time of the year, typhoon and unpredictable weather can make for a very intense party. So the venue was relocated to Niigata. So it's not really Mount Fuji, but that's where its essence is from. And so Daniel, Arielle, and we're in Fuji Rock for the last 3 days. Got to meet some artists and bands. Got to see a lot of performances and shows. And so today we're just gonna wrap up just day 3 and the overall 3.5 day event. And yeah, we could start with Arielle. Maybe what were your impressions of the? Maybe a two-part question is like, what were your highlights for day 3? And then to follow up is like, what was your impressions of the overall Fuji Rock Festival this year?
Okay. So day 3 was a very packed day. I'm not sure quite as packed as yesterday, but we had 2 interviews in the end, which we'll talk about more later. But so it was a packed day, lots of fun. We started off in I guess in the early afternoon with we saw in the sort of like it wasn't like one of the main things that we were covering, but we saw Japanese breakfast on the green stage at 1 p.m. So that was a fun thing to see. They're not Japanese and they're not, breakfast related, but it was a very nice sort of chill act to see in the sort of sunny Naiba. And so that was a fun thing to see. But then other things that we saw was 2 p.m. we saw Elephant Gym, which I won't get into the technical things about how they're set because I don't think I'm as good at it as Daniel, but it was really fun to see their set live after having interviewed them I think yesterday. So that was definitely a highlight. And then in terms of things that we did in the afternoon, we got to interview Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra, who, you know, are sort of ska inspired, orchestra as it happens. But yeah, they have been around for a really long time and they're really popular in Japan, but also abroad. And so meeting this sort of band member that was so passionate about performing abroad and had such a background in, you know, I don't know, like he was very sensitive to like how to get the attention and the warmth of the crowd going. And so I think it was an interesting conversation. And then for me, a highlight also of the evening was that I got to see the second half of the set of Muramasa. He's a British musician, and I had a sort of very vague idea about him, but seeing his set live was he's a really, really good musician, and he had some very interesting collaborations with female artists that were also really, really good. So I'd say in a nutshell, that was what happened today, but there was other things as well, but I think that those are the main things for me.
You got to see a lot of British artists during the last 3 days.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. There's a bit of a pattern.
It must be, were you missing the accent or like what? The culture?
I think, well, I mean, I lived in the UK, right? So I think I have some influence left over of that. I mean, for Muramasa, for example, was some of my friends went to see him in university. And so I was like, oh, yeah, I wish that I would have gone. And so now get to see them in Japan, of all places. So, but they were really good and they were very well received by the Fuji Rock crowd, which I was actually surprised with because I thought it would be a bit more, I don't know, like indie and so on. But yeah, everybody seemed to enjoy it, so that was fun.
That's great. That's great. All right, how about yourself, Daniel? What were your highlights for day 3?
Well, let's see. So we saw a lot of the same stuff as each other today. So the highlights might be similar, but to take one that Arielle maybe did not pick up on just now was Zuto Mayonaka de Inoni. Which means if only it could be midnight all the time. I think we all understand that feeling very well. And they are a Japanese band. They've only been around like a couple of years, but a few years. But formed out of the kind of the. So in Japan, there's a very strong scene around Vocaloid, which is music that is made using. I mean, you might have heard of Hatsune Miku, is one of the most famous ones, but it's software that sings basically, and a lot of the Vocaloid producers of the sort of the big first wave of Vocaloid, you know, they would release songs that got maybe millions of plays or whatever. They started to go on and become producers of bands as well, and so Zutomayo kind of comes from that scene. So it's interesting because Vocaloid is by its very nature something that is like a homemade home studio kind of DIY kind of music, but you're taking that template but transplanting it to a band sound. So it sounds like it's a very like particular sound that's popular at the moment in Japan. And Zutomayo, yeah, they play that kind of music. They also have this thing which is common around some of these artists, that they don't like to show their faces in any publicity materials and things like that. So if you want to see what they look like, you've got to come to the show. And they were great. They played. They had what they kind of, because you come to these big festivals, you have the big sort of jumbo screens where you can see like close-ups of all the artists and that kind of thing. But because they don't show their faces, everything's obscured. It's all shown with like blurred camera footage, or it's cut just at the neck of each of the members and things like that.
Yeah.
But what you're losing it with that, they more than make up for with this quite impressive sort of sense of showmanship that's definitely leveled up a lot since we last saw them at Fuji Rock 3 years ago, where in addition to all the main members of the band, they have one guy who's playing like they had a panel of like 5 CRT TV monitors, like old-fashioned televisions, like the old tube TVs. He was playing them as percussion. So as he hit each one, they played a different, they were tuned slightly differently. And so he was playing these amazing percussion things on these televisions. And then they had a couple of like old school analog reel-to-reel tape machines, which they were playing almost like a violin, I guess, where they were sort of threading the tape back and forth through these machines to make these really strange analog sounds, in addition to the music, which is very poppy, but very cerebral at the same time. Anyway, they were very, very good, and that was a definite highlight for me.
Yeah, I've also seen Zitomayo live when I was working on YouTube, and I agree with a lot of the points that you've got to experience them live, even though they don't show their faces or reveal their identity. And it's quite, it's an interesting way to just focus on the music and listen to the melodies, the layers of sounds that they create. I think, yeah, Daniel, you pointed out that they do bring out and draw out a lot of interesting sounds from conventional instruments. And I think that's what makes their group very, very interesting. And their vocalist is very, very, very articulate with her diction and just her pacing and the tempo. I think they're Zitomayo is a wonderful group. Glad that you got to see them, or like got to experience them live again. Yes, so let's maybe go back to the second part of my question, and we can wrap up Fuji Rock 2022 for this year. So Fuji Rock 2022 returns to a live format, again, inviting international artists to Japan. Previously, it was a challenge to bring international artists and bands to Japan because of COVID-19 protocols, and a recent Fuji Rock event only featured local homegrown talent. But now we've seen the return of international guests and talent, and also, yeah, it was the scale is starting to pick up to what it was before COVID-19 hit. So I think both of you had interviews with a lot of people and got to meet the Fuji Rockers and maybe get their opinions on how the live music experience has changed. And you talked about COVID-19. Are they worried about it? Are there changes to the experience? But like overall for 2022 Fuji Rock Festival, what did you think about in the context of in our era now of the COVID-19, and also just it is kind of like a privilege to travel overseas and internationally. What did you think of the overall event? Let's start with Arielle.
First of all, I hope that it doesn't sound too terrible because the music started in the red marquee. So we'll see how this goes. But anyway,
Good.
I would say that it was a successful event from my perspective and from what I saw. I say that like I am cautiously optimistic in the sense that we talked with people that were on the ground and about how they were feeling about the Fuji Rock taking place in the midst of COVID and whether they were uneasy about it taking place. And most people were just of the opinion that if you took care and if you, applied the appropriate measures of like self-hygiene and washing your hands and wearing masks and so on, it seemed reasonable that Fuji Rock could occur and could take place. And if anything, they were really, really grateful that it was happening. Like many of them were just like very happy that there was like a sort of there seemed to be a return of normality of sorts, and so in that sense, I think there's one thing. From the artist side as well, I mean, I think there was a variety. I mean, I can talk about the artists that I spoke with. So in my case, Zombie Chang, she was saying how if anything, like COVID was a period of self-discovery for her, a way of like finding out that actually she's pretty happy just staying at home and like if anything, she wants to find ways of delivering her music where she doesn't have to be so much in contact with so many photographers and always like bombarded with information and so on. She can just focus on her music. But then, we spoke, for example, today with Bloody Wood. We managed to interview them, and they were saying, they were saying other things about how they were, they're used to like the bureaucracy having to go through rules to travel and so on, and so how they're, they're really happy. So that's things are sort of like going back to normality, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear also what Dana has to add to this as well.
I mean, I would add that I've spoken to a lot of people at the festival, festival goers, and also artists while we've been here. And a lot of people I've spoken to, they didn't come here from Tokyo or from even Osaka or like a well-connected city. A lot of people are coming here from the middle of nowhere, and they want to go and see live music, and they want to meet people, and it's something that people have really missed. And so to have this back is something that a lot of people value very highly. And so, even if there is a risk associated for a lot of people that I spoke to, it's a risk that they consider to be worth taking. I mean, it's a difficult one. Like Arielle said, a lot of people that we asked, are you comfortable with coming to a festival amid another spike in COVID in Japan? A lot of people said, like Arielle said, well, as long as we obey the rules, and there are all these, rules, and they're looking out for us, and most people are obeying the rules or whatever. And it's true, but we don't really know. And so, who knows? In a week's time, 2 weeks' time, when we finally know the impact of, the festival, it could turn out that it was a super spreader event. We don't know. And then again, it might not be. I mean, it certainly feels safer to be spending your whole day outdoors than being in Tokyo and being among people in closed spaces. But it's impossible to tell, really. But certainly, whether the risks themselves are, how risky the situation is or not, is something that only time will tell. But certainly, in terms of people's willingness to take the risk and to just be happy that they can come out and meet people, that's certainly the overriding feeling that we got from people that we spoke to.
I think, yeah, that's well said. Maybe if I was to add that, it's one of those cliche things that music brings people together. There are a lot of international artists where like English is not even their first language, nor Japanese isn't one of their spoken languages, but they're here in Japan, and they're here in Fuji Rock performing for people that they might be seeing for the first time. And like because of what you said, people are just maybe trying to find a reason or trying to find an excuse to meet other people, and music was like the centerpiece in that. And I think that's something admirable to think about for Smash, the promoters, to put on Fuji Rock despite all the adversity and despite all the like the numbers spiking up in Tokyo recently. So yeah, thanks guys for your coverage this weekend. All the content is still rolling in, I believe, bit tomorrow and maybe throughout the week. But there's interviews, there's like photography, there's some coverage of some of the things that you saw this week and the stages that you got to experience. So all that's on live on Japan Forward. So for our listeners, just head over to Japan Forward, and you'll see in the top menu there's entertainment, and you can click Fuji Rock underneath that, and you can see some of the coverage there. So thank you to all our followers for joining us today. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel, and our spaces will be available on Spotify and Apple Music, so please listen to that and subscribe to that as well. At Japan Forward, we're looking for contributors and writers. Get in contact with us if you want to contribute with your skill set that you think would add value to our vision. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. And before we finally wrap up, any last words, Arielle and Daniel?
I would just like to say that, I mean, for me, like, this is the sort of the second time, like, covering Fuji Rock. So, compared to the first time, I feel like it was a bit, like, the first time I just feel like I was completely overwhelmed by how much, things were going on. And whereas this time I felt that I could really get into it, but at the same time really enjoy it. And I think I had a real opportunity to see all the different facets of Fuji Rock that make it so unique, and especially appreciate it because we haven't had Fuji Rock like in this form for 3 years now. And so I'm just particularly grateful for this edition. I think it was a very, fingers crossed, we can be cautiously optimistic that nothing will happen with the COVID-19, but it was an interesting edition to cover, and I'm really grateful that I could do it from here.
Yes, thank you, Arielle. And Daniel, any last words? Anything from IGN Japan that you'd like to say?
Yeah, well, not from IGN Japan necessarily, but for me, I mean, I've been coming to music festivals my whole life since I was, 14 years old, which I'm old, so that's a long time. And it's being out here in the mountains, being surrounded by amazing live music everywhere, being surrounded by just people who are excited to watch live music has been a really, it's been a really just a wonderful feeling. And like, it's been for all of us during the pandemic. It's been like 2.5 years, 3 years since we've come to anything like this for a lot of people, and it sort of feels, in a way, it feels like it was only yesterday that we were here last time, but in another way, it feels like a really long time, and it's so nice to be back at it. We were watching Japanese Breakfast this morning, and that's a band that I like, but it's not like one of my favorite bands. But they played a cover of a song by the Cranberries, who are an old Irish band who I used to love when I was younger, and a song called Dreams. It's a very optimistic song. The singer of the Cranberries died a couple of years ago, very young, and that hit me really hard. And then while they're singing this beautiful rendition of this song, they have on their big video screen, they're showing footage from a Wong Kar-wai movie called Chungking Express. Chungking Express features a version of this same song by the Cranberries, but it's a Mandarin version of the song. And so there's all this stuff going on. It's like, it's this song that I love. It's this band that had this tragic stuff happen. It's this movie that I really loved with this footage that I haven't seen for years and years. And I just suddenly felt this tear rolling down my cheek. And it's something that really only happens when you're, when you're out in a place like this. And I think you can argue about the importance, during a pandemic of putting on what many might see as a frivolous event. And I'm sure there's all sorts of arguments for and against it. But when you think about the last couple of years of what we haven't had and how painful it's been to go without stuff like this, I think that's as good a reason as any to do it. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
Well said. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Arielle. And thank you to our listeners. Have a good evening and have a good, good start of next week. Tomorrow is August 1st. Can't believe it's already the end of July. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.